with that, now,
thank you very much, Anthony, and 안녕하십니까, good morning. It is a real privilege and honor to be here in Seoul today, and thank you very much to the organizers of this week's extremely important conference for this invitation. I actually first came to Seoul when I was 18 years old as a student, and I actually played in a football match at Yonsei University, and I scored a goal on that day. And so Korea has always had a very special place in my heart. And I later went on to work for Margaret Thatcher, the great Iron Lady of Great Britain. And I spent several years working for Margaret Thatcher. Lady Thatcher visited Korea twice, actually, in 1986 and also in 1992. And she had tremendous respect for the Korean people. In fact, she greatly admired the Korean people and the spirit of sacrifice, the fighting spirit of the Korean people in the defense of freedom. And 15,000 British soldiers fought alongside the South Korean people and the United States as well during the Korean War. So Korea has a very important place in British history. And when I worked for Margaret Thatcher in her private office in London, we worked together on a book called Statecraft, Strategies for a Changing World. That book was published in 2002. And in that book, Lady Thatcher planted the seeds of what became known later as Brexit, or Britain's exit from the European Union. In her book, Statecraft, which was Margaret Thatcher's last book, she urged the British people to retake control of their own destiny. She urged the British people to think about leaving the European Union and becoming once again a truly sovereign, free nation. And so it was Margaret Thatcher who began the process of Brexit through the ideas that she planted in her final book. And on June 23rd, 2016, the British people voted in a historic referendum to leave the European Union. 17.4 million Britons voted to leave the EU. This was the single biggest democratic vote in British history. And the British people voted for Britain to retake control of their own laws, their own borders, their own trade policy, their own destiny, and their own future. And so Brexit was a great strike in favour of freedom and national sovereignty. And my message to you today is that Brexit is a new frontier of freedom and opportunity, not only for Britain, but also for Europe, for the United States, and also for the Korean people and the whole of Asia as well. And I would like to present to you a positive picture of what Brexit means. Brexit means that Britain will be free to negotiate and sign its own free trade agreements across the world. Brexit will mean an even stronger special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom, which is why President Trump, the US administration, has given their 100% wholehearted backing for Brexit. And President Trump will be travelling to London for a state visit in early June to express his strong support and backing for Brexit. And already, the United States and Great Britain are in discussions about a big free trade agreement between the United States, the world's biggest economy, and the UK, the world's fifth largest economy. And so the American government, the American people see in Brexit a tremendous opportunity there. And there has unfortunately been a great deal of disinformation, negative coverage of Brexit. But let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen here today, that Brexit will be a great success and that Britain will thrive and prosper outside of the European Union. The UK is the world's fifth largest economy. It's a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It has the strongest armed forces in Europe. London is the world's biggest financial centre. Foreign direct investment is flowing into the United Kingdom at this time. Britain's growth rate exceeds that of all the other major European economies at this time. And above all, Brexit represents the real spirit of freedom. And that is a spirit of freedom that I think the Korean people fully understand, and they hold that dear to their own hearts. The desire to be a sovereign nation, free to shape your own destiny on the world stage. And already the Korean government is in discussions with the British government about moving forward with a UK-Korea free trade agreement once Brexit has been implemented. And already 300 Korean companies are investing in the United Kingdom. Companies such as Samsung, Hyundai, for example, are household names now in the United Kingdom. And I think with Brexit, there can be a very, very powerful free trade deal between Seoul and London. And above all, I think Brexit offers the opportunity for South Korea and for Great Britain to move closer together as two nations that have invested blood, sweat, and tears in the defense of freedom. Two great countries working together. And Brexit offers that tremendous opportunity for the South Korean people and for the British people to come closer together. And it was certainly my former boss Margaret Thatcher's desire that the Korean people and the British people could work together as great beacons for freedom in the world. It has been a real privilege and an honor to speak to you today. Kamsahamnida, and I very much look forward to continuing the discussions over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, and my thanks to Money Today for the opportunity to be here. It is interesting to consider how much the world has changed in the 20 years since Money Today was founded. 20 years ago, China had the 7th largest GDP in the world, behind that of Italy, and the United States had a GDP 9 times larger. China was also, we thought, on the path to economic reform. And it was one of the main arguments for why the United States and the West pushed to have China join the World Trade Organization, in the belief that not only would this sustain economic reform, but it would also potentially lead even to political reform. And when we looked at Jiang Zemin and we looked at Zhu Rongji, we saw leaders who seemed to be proposing and pushing economic reform, liberalization, a move away from centralization. Fast forward now, 20 years later, and what do we find? We find a China whose economy has grown, but is more centralized in its planning, that is less interested in reform, a process that began under Hu Jintao, but has unfortunately been sustained under Xi Jinping. We see less economic reform, and we certainly see very little prospect for political reform. At the same time, we see a United States that has also shifted and transitioned. It has gone from a US under Bill Clinton, which signed NAFTA, to apparently a president that is far less interested in free trade. Certainly Donald Trump is different from every other president that the United States has ever had. His background is not one of diplomacy. His background is not one of the military. His background is not one of politics or being a politician. His entire background is that of being a businessman in the world of finance. As a result, by his behavior, we see a very different president. We see a president who, in terms of China, very clearly sees China as the main challenge to the United States, but not necessarily in a military sense, although it is a factor, but above all in the economic and financial realm. And for this reason, while his rhetoric suggested that he was more opposed to free trade, in reality, when we look at his actions around the world, he has not, in fact, acted in general against free trade. When you look at Korea, he has sustained the Korea-US free trade agreement. He came into office saying he was opposed to NAFTA, and yet today we have the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, where he has been very, very firm in taking proactive measures in the world of business and finance and trade has been towards China. And this is reflected in the ongoing trade deals. Even here, however, he has been pushing a very different set of policies than we have seen from previous presidents. Despite talking about the trade deficit, despite talking about currency manipulation, these have not been the issues that President Trump has truly been holding against China. Instead, and indeed, he has rejected Chinese offers to purchase up to $1 trillion worth of American goods, ranging from agricultural products such as soybeans to aircraft and other manufacturing. Instead, President Trump has been very, very much focused on intellectual property and on the information and communications technologies that are associated with the information age. Intellectual property is the lifeblood of the information age. Economics now depend as much on ideas as they do on the physical aspects of production. These ideas are in turn transmitted via ICT, information communications technology, and the security of that transmission is now integral to both economic and military security. And so as a result, as we see in the November letter from the U.S. Trade Representative's office, the focus of this administration in the ongoing trade dispute with China is actually about intellectual property. When we look at the issues that have been specified, when we look at the issues of joint ventures, of forced technology transfer, of licensing agreements, these all come back down to intellectual property. Similarly, the concerns about Huawei and 5G, again, come around to issues of information security. Ironically then, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are actually very much in agreement. They both agree that as we go forward into the 21st century, the most important issues confronting us are those of information, intellectual property, and information security. And these are the issues that are really at stake in the ongoing trade clashes, but more importantly, writ large, over the shape of the international trading system in the years to come. For the Republic of Korea, this holds forth real opportunities and potential as well as pitfalls. As the U.S. expresses real concerns about intellectual property and information security, as the PRC engages on those same issues, it is Korean industry that offers a real potential alternative to companies like Huawei and ZTE. It is not an accident that so much attention has been focused on South Korea since the rollout of the 5G networks earlier this year. Korea, as a world leader in ICT, will undoubtedly play a major role in setting the terms for the 21st century on the information frontier. And I certainly look forward to having a conversation with all of you about the shape and nature that this is likely to take. Thank you again very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Well, thank you very much. And for the next 25-30 minutes or so, we're going to have some discussions, because I see a lot of doubtful expressions on some of your faces, some astonishing faces, and some very pleasing faces. So we have a diverse opinions among our audience. But before we get there, when I said earlier, I like money, I like making money today, I'm sure you're agreeing with that point too, and that's why we're here. So if I may, to our Korean friends, if I make a silly Korean jokes, 저기 이제 올해가 20주년을 맞이해서 머니투데이가 이런 행사를 하게 됐습니다. 그래서 저도 머니투데이를 알게 된 지가 한 2년 정도가 됐습니다만은 뭐니 해도 머니투데이가 잘 하는 것 같습니다. I don't think I hear any loud laughing, sounds. So it was very chilling, silly jokes. So putting aside those remarks, let's begin with one big question. Still, many people around the world, definitely including our friends and colleagues and many, many friends in Korea, who is Donald Trump? What is he doing? So let me begin with that question. Now, I'm asking you this because you have been in touch with his team to talk about Brexit, to talk about US-UK FTA, and you had actually opportunity to see him and meet him. What do you see in him? How do you define President Trump?
Well, Anthony, that's a great question, and yes, I had an opportunity actually to meet the President twice in the White House earlier this year as part of briefings ahead of the State of the Union address. And I have to say, with President Trump, he's a really formidable figure. And so President Trump, in many ways, he's a sort of larger-than-life character. He's somebody who is very, very forceful, who knows what he believes, what he thinks. He's unusual as a politician in the sense that he's actually somebody who, in fact, delivers on the promises he makes. And so when he makes these promises on the campaign trail, Donald Trump is actually someone who, in fact, tries 100% to deliver on those promises. And so that actually makes him a very unusual politician. It has to be said. And I think that, you know, what we have seen in the United States over the past 2.5 years is a very different approach. It's an approach based on the view that US national sovereignty really matters. It's a very different approach, I think, to the Barack Obama approach to international affairs. And so I think that, you know, Donald Trump is somebody, as he puts it, he puts America first on the world stage. What does that mean? Actually, at the end of the day, that means that this is a president who looks out for US interests. But he also, at the same time, is someone who believes very firmly in American leadership on the world stage. So we've not seen a US retreat on the world stage, quite the opposite, actually. And in fact, you are seeing very robust American leadership in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East. And so this is not an isolationist presidency, but it's a very forceful presidency. It's a very clear-eyed presidency. And it's a move away from what President Obama used to describe as leading from behind. So it's the end of the leading from behind era that you have now with President Trump.
Interesting. I don't know how many of you actually agree or disagree, but the key platform, the beauty of this key platform is sharing different perspectives, and you sort out these different perspectives and make your fine strategy and decision making. So, Nadine, would you like to add anything else to what Nan said, especially because President Trump talks about China a lot, but I don't think he's going after China to destroy the Chinese economy. This tweet-loving president seems to have a great fun in terms of talking about his personal relationship with the Premier Xi. How do you see President Trump's approach to China? And how do you see in his sort of unusual sort of personality in terms of political scene?
So I think that a couple of things need to be kept in mind, building off of what Nada said. Above all else, President Trump's default language and default concepts are those of the world of finance. And we see this with regards to countries such as North Korea. We see this with regards to countries such as Iran. This is not a president who has necessarily been engaging as much in overt political and military action, but has very much employed financial tools and threats and implements. We see, for example, just earlier today, the announcement that the U.S. was going to waive all further, would end all further waivers for Iran with regards to oil sales. This, again, is an economic tool rather than a military tool. So with regards to China, he looks at China as the number 2 GDP, but he also looks to China as a country that could be an important partner because it is the number 2 GDP, but if it does not play by the rules, then it is more of a threat than simply because it now has a large navy or a modernized nuclear force or is sending military aircraft into the Central Pacific. And that focus, above all else, is the technologies of the future having to do with information. So at the same time, he is also someone who you should take seriously, but not always literally. And I think that his relationship with Xi Jinping and relationship with other leaders is something that he uses as a means of having at least a conversation. But we should not assume that if he is on good terms with someone at a personal level, his policies will slant in that direction. And conversely, simply because he is not on good terms at a personal level, that he will necessarily have bad relations. I think he is, in fact, very much focused on American interests. And that is the driving, guiding force behind his policies, whatever his personal feelings and relations with other leaders.
Thank you, Dean. I mean, by this point, you may be wondering, okay, this is all right, but why are they talking about, political stuff? In order to get into real practical opportunities and even challenges ahead of us, we need to take a step back and to see what's the setting here, what's the frame here, and what are the players here. And that's why we're talking about these big picture type situation. Now, I want to make clear that once again, the Harris Foundation is a think tank. So we are not partisan or contract-based organization. We're an independent policy operation think tank. But for some reason, President Trump, he's quite open to our policy suggestions, either domestic economic policies or foreign policies. So unlike many other think tanks in Washington, D.C., the Harris Foundation, we have had a unique sort of interactive two-way relationship with President Trump and his team. And we thought sharing this informed perspective may be informative to your understanding of what's really happening in Washington. But having said it, I would also point out that from Korea's perspective, because we are holding this conference in Seoul, probably we never had this kind of president in terms of dealing with North Korea. No other president had two summits before. We don't see any provocative action from North Korea. We'll see in what's going to come out of this Kim Jong-un and Putin summit. But my point is that this is really changing, evolving geopolitical economic situation. And I think that we should take this as a kind of unique opportunity to think through and see what kind of unique opportunities we can grab. Because the audience of Key Platform is unusual. It's a bit different from many other conferences as far as I know. You have a very practical mindset. You're either in the private sector or you're trying to connect private sector and public sector. So once again, by sharing this big picture analysis, we want to be of resource to you and informative to your organizational perspectives. Now, coming back to Brexit now, why is it happening? You kind of talked about freedom and sovereignty, but I think a lot of our European friends, I think they're still struggling to understand the exact reason and nature of this whole Brexit. There are still pros and cons among our friends and allies in Europe. How would you address those concerns?
Yeah, that's an important question, and at Heritage we've actually met with dozens and dozens of delegations all over Europe in the last couple of years, and invariably they ask questions about Brexit. I would say that Brexit really is a game changer for the whole of Europe. What you see in Britain is potentially the shape of things to come to the rest of Europe as well, which is why the European Union has been fighting so hard to stop Brexit, and why the negotiations with Britain have been so difficult, is because the EU fears what Brexit means. Because they fear that if Brexit is a great success, that other European countries are going to follow. And the reality is the winds of change are blowing across the European continent. And there is a challenge to the existing ruling political elites across Europe. And you're going to see that in the European parliamentary elections, which begin on May 23rd. And so Brexit has huge implications for the future of Europe, because Brexit is about fundamentally important principles. Sovereignty, self-determination, the right to make your own laws, control your own borders. These are very, very powerful principles. And I think Brexit is going to potentially transform the whole of Europe.
So we are actually going through very exciting yet kind of uneasy times, quite frankly, right? Because this is a process, this is an evolving situation, and we don't know the final outcome of this whole journey. But I happen to agree with now, because we couldn't really go on as we had been. We needed some kind of new momentum. I think one of those momentum was Brexit, and another momentum was probably the election of Trump. I guess everybody, as far as I understand, almost everybody, in November 2016, they were really dumbfounded about the election outcome of the United States. Then my question becomes then, so we are going through this evolving uncertainty, seemingly very chaotic, turbulent times, but how can we be optimistic about potential opportunities? I see a lot of companies, they cannot make any decisions because of, say, Brexit uncertainty. But we have to admit that's one dimension of the picture, right? So then, if you address those, again, uneasiness and uncertain sort of the decision-making process, how would you convey the different side of the picture, meaning why should we be, nonetheless, optimistic about potential opportunities?
Well, I think one of the reasons why we should take comfort or take heart is that despite a lot of elevated rhetoric, which is exacerbated by social media and the 24-hour news cycle, underlying realities actually have not changed all that much. If you look at, for example, the United States, how many treaties, how many agreements has the United States actually ended since January 20th, 2017? If you take a look, the U.S. actually has not ended any of its trade agreements. The U.S. withdrew from the INF Treaty because of Russian cheating, not because of a general isolationism. The U.S. has negotiated new agreements, for example, with Mexico and Canada in the area of trade, despite sounding like the U.S. was opposed to it. As important has been a willingness to nonetheless work with key partners, whether it's the EU, whether it is Japan, whether it is South Korea, with most countries to reach a new equilibrium with regards to the global trade situation. And finally, technology seems to be continuing almost regardless of politics. So as a result, especially in key areas such as 5G, this is not something that is being determined by politicians in the sense of the Internet of Things, in the sense of autonomous vehicles, in the sense of all of these things. Obviously, policy will impact it, but technology has a pace of its own. And here, the freer economies of the West, whether it is South Korea, whether it is the United States, clearly will be in a better position to harness these technologies, to develop these technologies. And here is real opportunities. I don't think it is an accident that the first quarter reports that are coming out have led to unprecedented heights on the various stock exchanges over the last several days, which suggests that a lot of companies and businesses are looking forward and saying the economy is not going to slow down. And I think partly because the technology is continuing to develop at pace.
I think that's a very fair point. No matter what, what's happening in the political world, technology will advance. And I think that's very undeniable fact and pattern we really have to recognize and even embrace. Now, let's try to predict a few things here and there. So now, as you know, I think you will be busier again, as President Trump is planning to go. Actually, he is going to London in early June to visit, his counterparts and a royal visit in London. What do you expect? What kind of visit that will be? Again, in the context of Brexit, ongoing discussion, and also, say, President Trump's popularity in Europe.
Yeah, so a very significant state visit by President Trump to London on June 3rd to June 5th. The President will be meeting with the Queen, and also with the Prime Minister and British political leaders. I think that President Trump's visit actually will be very timely, very significant, and also a wake-up call actually for the British political establishment, because I think the whole Brexit process has been moving very, very slowly. I think there has been a lack of real strong, robust leadership on Brexit. especially from the British Prime Minister, and there is a great deal of speculation now that Theresa May will indeed stand down in the next few months and be replaced by a new Brexiteer Prime Minister, someone like Boris Johnson, for example, former Foreign Secretary. But I think that President Trump's message to Britain when he goes over there is going to be 100% crystal clear. He doesn't mince his words, Donald Trump. He's going to say, Brexit is great for Britain, it's great for America. America's ready to put forward a US-UK free trade agreement. The United States wants Brexit to happen as soon as possible because the President believes that Brexit is great for the US-UK special relationship. Brexit, and this is very important, Brexit is hugely popular among American conservatives. And I think that President Trump views Brexit as part of his own DNA as well. And I think that what you're going to have from the President is 100% a very positive vision for Brexit, what it means for Britain and America after the US-UK special relationship.
And you'll be in London around that time.
Yes, I'll be in London.
Yeah. I mean, just one minor footnote. I'm always amazed by Mao's looking young, basically. I don't understand how he can maintain his youth face, because he has a PhD, he's been in this policy environment for many, many years. Maybe he's not getting any policy-related stress at all. I mean, this is not a fun work to do, very dry, chaotic. But I'm always amazed by nice looking young kind of face. So anyway, just minor footnote.
I'm just following your footsteps.
Okay, good. Dean, what do you know about U.S.-China trade talk? So now President Trump says we are getting there. We're gonna announce something. So what's the sort of expected or kind of outcome of this U.S. trade talk?
Well, I believe that Trade Representative Lighthizer and Secretary Mnuchin are going to be heading over to China in the coming week. And the Chinese are expected to visit the United States to sustain negotiations in May. At this point, it's very clear that both sides would like to see further movement on trade, but the U.S. is still holding firm on the issues of intellectual property. This is not an administration that is desperate for a trade deal. It is an administration that wants a good trade deal that supports American interests. And I think one of the interesting things is what emerged out of Hanoi. We tend to think of the Hanoi summit as being about the U.S. and North Korea. But consider the message that Xi Jinping would have taken away from Hanoi. That a president who everyone said was desperate for a deal with North Korea, instead got up and walked out of the room, rather than make a bad deal. If you are Xi Jinping and you watch Donald Trump do this, something unprecedented, no other president had ever walked out of a meeting before, do you want to go into a trade negotiation with that president thinking that he has to make a deal? Do you want to have a summit with him where the trade deal, maybe he's not happy with that? Can you be confident that he will nonetheless sign on the dotted line at the end of the day? Or if he walks out, does that hurt Trump or does that hurt Xi? Does that hurt the U.S., still the #1 GDP, or does that hurt a China whose GDP growth rate is slow? Who really comes out now looking like they need a trade deal? I am not at all convinced that at the end of the day, it is the U.S. that is negotiating from weakness. I think that Xi Jinping is looking at this very, very volatile, very, very disrupted situation and thinking very carefully about how much he should be perhaps willing to concede if he wants a trade deal to come out of it.
Very good point, Dean. I mean, this is really fascinating geopolitical chess game. I mean, once upon a time, we have something called six-party talk. It wasn't really six-party talk. It wasn't really effective. But to me, especially this weekend, when Kim is going to see Putin in Vladivostok, the President Trump is coming to Japan in May, Xi Jinping is trying to cut a deal with the President Trump, President Moon goes to Washington to sort out what's the next step. This is really kind of fascinating, an elevated version of six-party talk. Now, having said it, now what's your take on the recent Hanoi summit? As Dean alluded, a A lot of people said that's the failure of the summit. That's the probably most likely predicted outcome of the U.S.-North Korea engagement, and thus we don't have any more hope. But I tend to think that that Hanoi summit wasn't a failure. It may be a step back, but I think this is another platform for next development. How do you see it from your unique perspective?
Yeah, I think that the president was right in all the ways Dean mentioned. It's far better to have a no deal than a bad deal, and the same lessons could apply on the Brexit side as well. Actually, I think that Donald Trump is definitely an unconventional leader. He defies all expectations. He goes against the grain of tradition in many respects. And he believes that, through the force of his personality, that he can, change the way that other people think. And I think with regard to, Kim Jong-un, it's vitally important, I think, at the same time as the president talking to him, that we maintain this policy of maximum pressure on the North Korean regime. We maintain the sanctions that are in place, and the North Koreans have to understand that the United States will maintain that maximum pressure and will not in any way weaken that. And so it's vitally important to combine diplomacy with a demonstration of real hard power as well, which I think is what the U.S. administration is doing. So you have to really combine diplomatic efforts with a really forceful strategy on the sanction side, maintaining, of course, a very robust U.S. military presence as well. So the North Koreans have to understand that when they are dealing with the United States and this administration, there are not going to be concessions from the United States. It's the North Korean side that has to make concessions if they want to really come into the 21st century and be part of the international community. They have to change.
Well then, in a way of wrapping up our session here, obviously we touched upon a lot of different moving variables. We don't plan, we know all the answers. Our approach, our attempt was to share, let's say, our informed perspectives. But to our friends and audience of our key platform, one of today's key platforms, now and then, what would be your, say, final sentence or words in terms of sharing? So, for example, you can say, hey, this is a time to be really cautiously optimistic and to make your strategic decision and move forward. How would you advise? If they are your potential investors, how would you advise them? That's your final word or sentence?
I think that one of the things to keep in mind for especially the Republic of Korea is that it has now entered into a new phase economically, politically, diplomatically. When we look at advanced technologies, when we look at a variety of things, South Korea is at the forefront. And I think that as South Korea thinks about its own South policies as it expands its ties to the Middle East, that it should hopefully undertake a comprehensive approach that links together security aspects, industrial aspects, technological aspects. The various topics that will be in the breakout sessions today and tomorrow highlight, I think, exactly that kind of approach, and I call it the key platform conference planners for taking that approach.
Thank you, Dean. Now?
I think that, I'm optimistic about the big picture on the world stage right now. Of course, there's a lot of turmoil all over the world, but there are tremendous opportunities, and South Korea, I think, is one of those countries that will really take full opportunity of those opportunities. It's a very close U.S. ally, a very outward-looking nation, a country with an incredible workforce, and a very, very bright future. And it's actually been, nearly a couple of decades since I was last over here in Korea, actually. And you look at the stunning transformation in Seoul. This is absolutely amazing. And this brings me back to a point I made earlier that Margaret Thatcher, when she came to Korea, was really taken aback by the tremendous changes and development here. And she saw in Korea not just the tremendous economic growth, but she saw the spirit of a truly great nation. The fact that the Korean people have been willing to lay down their lives in defense of freedom is something she greatly respected, which is why I think that Korea is going to be one of the truly great successful nations of the 21st century. And I think that you're going to see the US-Korean alliance partnership further strengthened. You're going to see the UK-Korean partnership strengthened. So this is an exciting time. It's a time of tremendous opportunity on the world stage. And I think that South Korea is in a perfect position to be a huge part of that success.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Niall Gardner and Dean Chang, we thank you for your strategic patience. Thank you very much.